New footage from the Letcher County Courthouse has recently been released by Court TV. The footage depicts several brief witness interviews that occurred immediately after Letcher County Sheriff Stines shot and killed District Court Judge Kevin Mullins inside the judge's chambers. The witnesses all describe the sheriff's bizarre behavior in the minutes and hours leading up to the shooting. In the months that have followed, rumors and speculation about a possible motive have been rampant. One rumor in particular that has permeated every corner of the internet, news, and social media involves an alleged inappropriate relationship between the judge and the sheriff's then 17-year-old daughter. This rumor has been debunked by all involved parties. The families of both the judge and the sheriff have denied the allegations, as have the Kentucky State Police investigators in charge of the case. Stines' own defense attorneys have said that they have seen no evidence to support this rumor. Despite multiple denials and corrections by investigators, attorneys, and the families themselves, this rumor has nevertheless persisted and at times been relentlessly pushed on social media and by certain creators. But there is another possible motive that the media and creators seem to be missing or are avoiding altogether. A motive that does indeed involve the sheriff, his wife and daughter, and perhaps the judge. But it paints a very different story than the one that has dominated the airwaves and the news for the last 10 months.
I got to the courthouse today. Mickey came in and one of Kevin was in a Zoom meeting. I was sitting in the jury room talking to him. He came in and he said, I need to talk to Kevin, and someone said he's in a Zoom meeting. And he had a file in his hand and he seemed upset then. So I don't know if he was mad about something in that file, or maybe they had a disagreement about that. He was like adamant he needed to talk to Kevin then, and he had his file in his hand, so I don't know if that had anything to do with anything.
Okay.
But it was something about domestic violence. Something in the file about domestic violence. I don't know if it was someone he knew and he wasn't happy about what Kevin said. I don't know. We all went to lunch together today. Mickey and Kevin, Christy, Tim, Michael Clark. We had a street fight, and Mickey acted really strange today. I've been around him a lot. He's always a real fun, cut-up, easy-going guy, and he acted strange at lunch. And I don't know if this matters, but I'm going to tell you anyway, because after it's odd to me. He leaned back in his chair at lunch, and they were talking about re-election. He said, I'll never make it to the next election. Thought that was odd when he said it. Didn't really know what he meant by that.
Yeah.
And he was, leaning back, his gun was right in front, and Michael Clark looked over and he said, it's an awful big gun you got there. He said, yeah. He said, these are hot. And he said, oh, I don't know. He said, well, it looks like you filed the numbers off of it, which was odd then, but now I'm kind of wondering if it was in fact a gun that had the numbers off. We just sat down, we were talking, and Mickey walked in, and he just had a weird look on his face, like he was just, he just looked odd. I thought he looked odd, maybe because I know his normal actions. Oh, he just acted odd all day today. And he walked in and in a really hateful voice, he said, well, I need to get out of here, I need to talk to Kevin in private. And we all just kind of looked at each other because it's Kevin's office, so it was odd to me that he was telling people to get out of Kevin's office.
He seemed odd. He just seemed off. Like, what do you normally say? I don't know. There's just something that just didn't seem right. Yeah, something on his mind. Or something. He wasn't present, if that makes sense. It was just something was just off. And, it was odd. He had his gun on him, and Michael was commenting about something they're giving a hard time about his gun getting small, and they had to go, there's a piece of paper that was taped to Dotson's office. He's like, no, you should get that paper. He's like, no. So it was just odd. You come in and sorry, everybody needs to leave, but the tone, the meter was changed, tone was changed.
Right now, Judge is my best friend. We all had lunch together in the street fight. And he did tell Judge he needed to talk to him when we got back. But, after we'd been in court, I was in Judge's office. And Mickey walked in and told us to all get out. We need to talk to him. he said, just go get out. I don't know exact word. But it was odd the way he did it. It was normal. I mean, we all kick and bicker at each other all the time, but it's like fun, just workplace. They always have been buddies. I heard gunshots and I just jumped up and ran. I ran out as fast as I could. I came to this building and locked myself in. Honestly, at first I thought something fell over, but then it continued. Like I heard the very first one. The first two were like right back to back with that first one. I thought something had failed, but then I immediately heard the second one and I ran. Things were weird today. This morning, I don't even know actually who else involved, honestly, but this morning, Mickey came over, they didn't talk about Judge with an EBO, whatever, he just seemed a little off.
He's wanting to get the judge to sign an EPO?
Oh no, somebody was coming to draw the warden, and he needed to ask questions about it or something.
Okay.
But he was just like a walk back and forth, walking around. He came back from lunch. The thing I thought was odd was whenever he came back, he had his gun on his side.
The sheriff did?
It was just in normal clothes today. So I didn't even know if he was working, honestly. And then, not because he didn't have it when he was first there. So then he came back with it.
Several sources said that the sheriff was kicked out of his home by his wife. They had some sort of a dispute, the night before the shooting. That was the reason that he was in plain clothes, because he wasn't able to have a uniform wherever he was, and that he showed up. When you see him in the judge's chambers, he's not wearing his sheriff's outfit. The sheriff then, we know about his movements, at some point went to see his daughter, and she didn't want to talk to him. So he then drove to the courthouse, and he went to see the judge. We do know that he picked up the phone. He tried to call his daughter from the judge's chambers. She didn't answer. Then he used the judge's phone, and she answered. So we have a situation where the sheriff had domestic issues at home. Clearly, he was kicked out of his house. There's been some dispute from different sources about when it happened, but my sources are saying it was that night before the actual shooting, and he was in a great deal of distress.
And we're watching that there courtesy of R&M Productions. And considering this new witness evidence that we just looked at there a moment ago, I wonder if Stines was arrested for domestic violence and was relieved of duty. This would explain his lack of an official uniform, and also allegedly he didn't have his duty or service weapon that day, according to witnesses. Stines had an illegal gun with the serial number filed off. If he was arrested for domestic and relieved of duty, it would also explain why the state police asked him what he was doing there at the courthouse that day. And Stines didn't say he was working or on duty. He mentioned having lunch with court staff and working there in the past. So it's possible Stines had been arrested for domestic and relieved of duty when he shot Judge Mullins. We just listened to 3 witnesses speaking who are in the video footage, the Chambers video footage, and one talked about Stines having an illegal weapon with the serial number filed off at lunch. He noticed that the serial number was filed off, and if you didn't catch that, you can go back and listen to that interview. Another witness talked about Stines being angry over a domestic violence case file And the witness kept talking about Stines being upset and something about this file. And then a third witness we just listened to talked about Stines confronting the judge about an EPO, or emergency protective order. Now let's put the puzzle pieces together. We know Stines was kicked out the previous night before the shooting by his wife, which let's presume was for domestic violence related to issues stemming from that lawsuit and the deposition that Stines had to give just three days prior to the shooting. And so what you come up with is you get enough pieces of the puzzle where you can create what's known as a working theory. Now, this becomes a working theory when you consider that former Sheriff Stines' daughter refused to see him and speak to him the day of the shooting. Again, let's presume that the EPO, the witness mentioned, that emergency protective order, was an order of protection that was issued or pending against Stines because of domestic violence. And an emergency order of protection and domestic violence allegations could have been made without Stines actually necessarily having been arrested yet. In closing, I want to give a big shout out to R&M Productions YouTube channel. I'll leave a link in the description for their channel. We just saw excerpts of their new video with those witnesses. I'll put a link in the description for the entire video. If you want to watch the entire video, it's available at the R&M Productions YouTube channel. And we are the only two channels that I've seen offering a working theory. All of these other channels and news outlets are really talking a lot of nonsense that doesn't really make sense. And it's really sad because it really hurts the integrity of the case and the investigation when I see these other YouTube channels just talking nonsense. And I'll just give I'm not going to mention the names of the channels, but I'll give some examples of the nonsense that they've been talking. So this idea that Sheriff Stines was in great fear, so he went and killed Judge Mullins. That is nonsense, complete nonsense. And it doesn't take a homicide hunter like Joe Kenda to say to let you know that when former Sheriff Stines shot Judge Mullins, he certainly wasn't in fear at that point in time, but I bet you Judge Mullins was in great fear. So people who are in fear, they go to get help. They don't do what this guy did. And then his family had kicked him out. He was upset about the this lawsuit that he had to give a deposition for. In fact, it's come out that he was upset that he had to give the deposition. He didn't want to give the deposition. He tried saying that the deposition would put his family in danger. What it actually did was it jeopardized his family, but not in the way he described. Him and his family, him and his wife or whatever, they had issues probably related to the stuff with the lawsuit, but probably also related to other stuff as well that I won't get into because then that involves too much speculation. But in my previous video, I talked about how officers can sometimes easily become addicted to illegal drugs because of the stress of the job, as well as the availability of free confiscated drugs. And I wouldn't say it's common, but it does happen. And certainly Stines had all of the characteristics of meth use. If you look at all of the witnesses and all of the information we have, he couldn't sleep he reported himself, this came from Stines himself, reportedly was unable to sleep for 7 days leading up to the shooting. So that again is a characteristic of meth use, where the drug methamphetamine does not allow the person to sleep. So I discourage those channels from covering stuff like this. They just don't. You really have to have a knack for it. You have to have an understanding and an eye for it. Really, it involves discernment. Some people have discernment, some people don't. And if you're going to cover this sort of stuff, you should have some discernment as far as how to sift through information and look through the different puzzle pieces and try to put together a puzzle or a picture, and what's known as a working theory. And so right now that's what we have, is a working theory, because in the law enforcement, they have all of the evidence that could prove this theory. We don't know what they're doing with it or what they're going to do with it. I feel like, in my personal opinion, I feel like this case is stalled in court. I feel like it should have been a slam dunk for the prosecution. I felt like I said in a previous video that they were holding back evidence that made Stines look guilty, and that it looked like they were going to try to let him off on some sort of a mental health, not guilty by reason of insanity sort of thing. Now, hopefully that won't work and that won't happen. As more of this information comes out, you can see it makes Stines look more and more guilty. And by guilty, I mean not only clearly guilty of killing Mullins, but it appears he may not even have known that camera was there. And so Sheriff Stines is clearly, it clearly shows that he's guilty in my personal opinion, when you look at everything. So you can't refute the video footage, obviously, which he may not even have known that video was in there. That's something that people should think about. That video camera was fairly new, and it's a question of whether Stines was aware that it was in there. Certainly, he did not expect to be arrested. If you look very closely at the body cam footage, when they first told Stines that he was being detained, and they had him cuffed, and they had him in the courthouse, and they were talking to him. And if you look very, very closely, there came a point in time when he realized that he was going to be being arrested, and his demeanor began to change quite a bit. He showed his teeth. He took a deep breath. He sighed. You just have to look closely at the footage and what's actually said in his body language. And he didn't think he was going to be arrested. He was trying to get out of it. He thought that he was going to be able to see his family. He kept asking to see his daughter. Obviously, that would not happen if there was any kind of a protective order in place, or a investigation related to domestic violence, or an arrest related to domestic violence. That would have prevented him from being able to see them. And but if he was able to see them, then I think that would have gave him some assurance that maybe he was going to get off, or they were going to let him go, and that maybe somebody was going to take those papers for the protective order and rip them up and pretend they never saw them. Obviously, none of that ever happened, and he was arrested. You can tell that when Stines realizes he's being arrested, around the time when they started talking to him about Miranda rights and stuff like that. And they told him that he was not going to be able to see his family because I guess they had drove there and were told that they weren't going to be able to see him, supposedly. And his Stein's demeanor changes at that point. It changes when he realizes he's being placed under arrest. And I think it's pretty obvious that he was guilty. To me, it seems like he shot the judge, if I'm correct, if this theory is correct, related to this domestic violence investigation or allegations related to his wife having him leave the house the previous night before the shooting. And also related to the EPO, the Emergency Protective Order. And the fact that he kept wanting to see his daughter didn't want to see him. She wouldn't answer him on his phone, but then supposedly she did answer him on the judge's phone. All of which goes into a premeditated situation where he killed the judge for premeditated reasons. It never had anything to do with him being afraid of the judge or him being concerned for his family. In fact, I think that it's going to come out that he was either arrested for domestic violence or was being investigated, or there were some sort of allegations of domestic violence, and that EPO, that Emergency Protective Order, in fact, was related to his family and him. So that's going to make him look very bad, and it'll show that all that stuff was made up, because at first Sheriff Stines tried to get off. It seemed to me like he was surprised that they even detained him that day. So I think that Stines thought that they were gonna let him go because they knew him or something. I'm not sure. Or maybe he didn't know that camera was in there, that was a fairly new camera. It's possible he didn't know that he was going to be on camera. But I don't see this as very mysterious or too much of a mystery. I think that the police have all of this evidence to show what I'm saying. I know that during the trial, until everything's all done, they kind of hold back on stuff, but it worries me. The longer this goes, it worries me. I think that it should be a pretty easy for the prosecution, as long as they're getting all of the evidence that the police have. I think that all of the evidence is going to make Stines, it's going to show that he was not in any danger. He did not do this to protect anyone. And all of that stuff was all a bunch of nonsense. In fact, I don't know why they would remove Stines from a lawsuit. I think that was a mistake, a judicial mistake, in my opinion. I don't think they should switch a different person over to the lawsuit because Stines is no longer the sheriff. They should have kept Stines in that lawsuit, and I don't really know a lot about that. But that's about it for this particular case. They're trying to get him off not guilty by reason of insanity. The longer that this drags out, the more I get worried that might actually work. This should be a slam dunk case with the evidence and stuff like that. I don't know they have it all right on camera. And no matter what his reason is, you can't just go take matters into your own hands anyway. So let's say, for example, that Judge Mullins was some bad criminal. Well, Sheriff Stines had the jurisdiction and the authority to arrest Judge Mullins. He didn't have to execute him. So the narratives that these news outlets have been pushing and the stories related to the background of this and the possible motives or reasons behind it are not supported by evidence, and it's all been nonsense. So that's why I wanted to put this out just to kind of reiterate what R&M Productions was saying there in their video, because we're really the only two that I've seen that are explaining this stuff to you guys. And the reason why is because the police have been holding back on all of their evidence. And I said in my last video, I criticized them and I gave, for example, I said that they're holding back on the witnesses. They're not releasing any witness testimony. Now, since then, they released. Now that's what we have. We have witness testimony. But that was just an example. There's other stuff that they are holding back as well. For example, phone forensics. We don't have any information about the phone's forensics. There's a big question mark about whether his daughter's phone was already in the judge's phone number was already in the judge's phone, or whether it wasn't. And it looks like even if it was, that it was because Stines put it in there. Certainly he punches her number in there right on camera. We can see him do it as if he doesn't know the camera's there. And then it's possible that if it was already in there from a previous date, that he did that on a previous date as well. So we just, everything that Stines said seemed to be like lies going into this, where at first he was trying to act like he shot the judge to protect his family. He was trying to sell that idea. When that didn't work, now he's trying to sell the idea that he is just completely crazy, And I don't think that that's the case. I think that this is a person who was falling apart. They were falling apart not only in their job, but with their family. I think that they were kicked out because of a domestic violence issue that may or may not have resulted in an arrest. But certainly I believe there were allegations made that resulted probably in an investigation at the very least. And that an emergency protective order was being sought. This is why his daughter wouldn't speak to him. This is why they were estranged, and he was all upset. And it's what's called a working theory. It's when the pieces of the puzzle, the things that you do know about the case, the theory that you're presenting makes it work. It makes sense. So this is what's called a working theory. And I hope that everybody appreciates the working theory that I have to present for this particular case. Thanks.